Mega Man ZX Advent is a game released in 2007 for the Nintendo DS and is a sequel to the first Mega Man ZX, 1 year after the original. Man, they really pumped these games out, huh? Kinda miss it, honestly. We really got a lot of Mega Man games back then. It takes place a few years after the original ZX game, and unlike its predecessors, designed more like an X game than a Zero game, but I'll get into that in a bit. We've got the same character selection screen, with a boy and a girl being Gray and Ash this time, but unlike the original ZX, they actually have some more gameplay differences than just faster crawl speed or whatever. Some of those differences being that certain biometal attacks are locked to one or the other, which I'll straight up say is stupid, especially in Model ZX's case, where the up and down stabs are locked to Ash and Gray respectively, and also their buster shots are slightly different. Gray has slightly slower but more powerful shots, and Ash has a laser shot that bounces around, and she has faster shots. I'll just be Gray for this playthrough, by the way. Only thing you'll miss in this video is Ash's intro stage and her saying booty a lot. Oh yes, this game is full English voice acting, and it's bad. Like, it feels like something that came out in the late 90s, back when studios didn't know how to dub voices properly. It's right up there with X4's English dub.
Ah! No, this isn't happening! There's no reason for me to go on. What? What am I fighting for?
Well, how's that lock coming? This is one tough nut to crack, but I'm almost there.
I am Pandora. Gray, I'm here to dispose of you.
The story begins with Gray in a mysterious lab sealed in a capsule when he's awakened early. Pandora then threatens to destroy him and he runs away. This gives him amnesia though, so he has no idea who he is at this moment. This sets up the intro stage quite nicely. The intro stage is quite different from ZX, as you don't have your biometal form yet, so you're stuck in your human form, or well, I guess Gray is a Reploid, so I guess it's a Reploid form for him, but they're functionally identical, nonetheless. It teaches you the basic controls as per usual, and shows that you can now shoot basic shots in Reploid/human form, which is a nice improvement from the first ZX. You also have the crawling that returns from the first ZX, but I don't use it that much. It makes this form somewhat usable instead of a liability, which is great. I'll absolutely have to highlight the song that plays in Gray's intro stage though. It's genuinely amazing. Gray is then faced by the intro stage boss of this game, and you just play a Mario Party matching minigame and it'll go down in no time. One easy intro stage boss later, and we're at the Hunter Base. The Hunter Base is the hub world of this game. Unlike the first CX game, this game is a lot more railroad in its map design. Everything branches off from there, and the world is a lot smaller and segmented. I like this change honestly, but I can understand if someone would prefer the more open map from the first CX despite the execution of that game. It gets you into the action faster, and it makes it you don't have to memorize the entire map for the game to be more fun like the first CX. I didn't mind the map in that game much after a few playthroughs, but I'm glad that barrier is gone nonetheless. Gray then receives his hunter's license and boards a train to Legion HQ, where he's ambushed by Prometheus and Pandora. They want Biometal Model A, and of course Gray is capable of Mega Merging it, much like Van Nail were with Model X. Model A lets Gray use A-Trans, which, if you're familiar with Axel from Mega Man X, that's his ability that lets him shapeshift into the enemies he defeats. In ZX Advent, however, when you defeat a Pseudoroid, you get their A-Trans data, which lets you transform into them. Yeah, this means you don't have a saber at the start, which has been the standard since 0-1, since, well, the main character was Zero or a form of him in the first ZX. This means you just have to play this more like a Mega Man X game, which is fine, to be honest. Not my preference, but not a bad thing at all. On the topic of A-Trans as a mechanic, though, I'm quite split on this mechanic, but I'll save that for when we get a few more boss forms. The boss of the train is Buckfire, who is a pretty easy first boss. Just avoid his relatively slow fire arrows and kick attacks, and you'll beat him in no time. The train is damaged from the prior stage, and Gray is contacted by the Sage Trinity, Albert, Thomas, and Mikhail. A fun reference to Dr. Wily, Light, and Cossack respectively. It tells Gray to get the train fixed so he can deliver Model A to Legion HQ, so in the meanwhile we've got two more stages to play, the Tower of Verdure and the Arctic Ice Flow. I've got good and bad news. The good news is that missions are automatically accepted, so no more starting and ending them like in ZX1, which is something I happened to suggest in the ZX video and I forgot they actually fixed this. However, the bad news is that you have a lot less boss flexibility, at least early on. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but I prefer the X/0 approach of giving the bosses up front and having the player choose the order they fight them. This puts ZX Advent's approach in line with Mega Man and Base of all things, where you start with 3 bosses and then unlock more as you beat them. Works very much the same here. I'll break down each stage as they're a lot more gimmicky this time compared to the first ZX, and I do that anyway in these videos. I'll start with the Tower Averter. This stage is pretty decent. Fun movement with the vines and spike traps you can shoot down with the buster, and there's a health up in the stage, so grab it. It works exactly the same as ZX1, which is great. There's also a spider mini-boss, so use Model A's new lock-on shot to defeat it quickly. Something I didn't mention yet is that the overdrive mechanic from the first ZX has been removed, which while I found it super fun, I can understand why it was removed since it was very unbalanced and shredded boss health bars quickly. In its place is the Giga Crush, which works like the standard Mega Man X Armor Giga Crush, where it'll do damage but use all your energy as a trade-off. Not worth it in most scenarios, but I figure I'd mention it. Also, great music as usual, one of my favorite pieces in the game. I remember listening to it outside the game after playing the stage for the first time. We're then introduced to the next boss, Rospark. He's pretty easy, honestly, just avoid his electric attack and stay vigilant on what vines he's using and use the buster carefully. The biometal damage system is still here, the red flashes if you recall from the last video, but it doesn't punish you for hitting the weak points this time. Thank goodness for that, since it was quite picky with them at points in the first ZX. Instead, each boss has 3 medals, bronze, silver, and gold, for beating them under certain conditions, which is a much better system in my opinion. Next stage is the Arctic Ice Flow, and I don't care for this stage much, to be honest. It's a fine enough stage, but it's basically just the use Buckfire stage, since this stage is practically a maze of ice blocks that only his ability can break. This stage also has some basic platforming and underwater gameplay, which is fine, standard Mega Man fare. There's a sub-tank here in this stage, so use Rospark's ability to reach it. Works just like the last CX game, and by extension the Zero games. The stage does have great music once again though, and looks nice, which is something ZX Advent does well like its predecessor. This boss is surprisingly one of the harder bosses in the game, with a really cool gimmick with his time abilities, where he'll replay an attack he just did in reverse, or speed himself up, or I guess slow you down technically. He's also immune to damage on his top, so you'll have to aim your buster shots carefully. Tense and honestly great boss. Back to the plot for a moment. After each stage, Gray is confronted by the Mega Man, 2 per stage, who are participating in a game of destiny where the Mega Man who collects Model W's pieces and awakens them will be crowned the Mega Man King. Since I mentioned it earlier, my thoughts on A-Trans's mechanic is split. On one hand, it's a really cool idea that you could become the bosses, as it can lend itself to neat platforming challenges and opportunities for exploration, which the game does occasionally do, such as using Chrono Force to slow down time and dash to hit a switch to get an upgrade as an example. Actually, Chrono Force's ability is very good for bosses in general. Just slow times down and switch to Model A or ZX and watch as most bosses crumble. I tended not to use this since I actually wanted to fight the bosses, but it's something you can do, jumping ahead way farther in the game, but it even works on the final boss, and I'll show a small clip as to why I won't use this for this review. There's another consequence to the A-Trans mechanic, that the levels feel very gimmicky due to having to be designed for all these forms, such as the ice level previously mentioned, or a section of a level that takes advantages of Rospark's ability. This means there's only one way to beat it, and it reduces player expression, which these games have always excelled at. Not saying that ZX Advent is a bad game with this, but it results in weaker level design than it otherwise would have been, in my opinion. Thankfully, the biometal forms still exist in this game, but I much prefer how the previous games handled special powers and forms. The boss forms are designed more as one-use tools, more like traditional Metroidvania upgrades as opposed to extensions of your movesets like the biometal forms. Once those 2 stages are completed, you can use all the forms you've gotten up to this point to use their elemental powers to unlock your way to the oil field. It's a sort of mid-stage, I guess, but this game has a weird progression structure in general compared to most Mega Man games. Not a bad thing once again, but wanted to highlight that. The stage is nothing too out of the ordinary, but it does remind me of the desert stage in 03 with the mini-boss at the end of the sand slide, which the boss itself is reused from the first CX as the snake, and the various enemies that swarm you as you navigate the desert. The boss here is Model FX. Pretty easy fight, just buster shot with Model A and do your best dodging Model FX's buster shots. This gives us the first biometal form of the bunch, and it functions pretty much identically to how it did in the first CX. It even has the buster head and all, so the touchscreen gimmicks aren't gone from this game. Before we head off to Legion HQ, backtrack to the start of Oilfield and use Model FX to get the first biometal upgrade, which replaces using energy crystals to repair biometals, which is how it worked in the first game. Speaking of energy crystals, besides using them to unlock the fast travel points, they're practically useless unless you're doing side quests, which is a bit unfortunate. I haven't done any of the side quests in this game, so I don't know if they're even useful there, but I just wanted to mention. Now we're off to Legion HQ, and there's a ton of callbacks to previous X1 gimmicks such as the Breakable Glass and Storm Eagle stage, and you even get a sub-tank in almost the same way. The minecart from Armored Armadillo stage, and the bee minibus from ZX1's Highway stage, which in themselves were a callback to X1's intro stage. Music's also fantastic here. The stage is rather interesting as the boss, Model PX, isn't at the end of the stage, rather he's at the middle, so that's a change of pace for a Mega Man stage. He can be a bit annoying with him disappearing, but use Model A and use the sub-tank if you have to. Oh, this area also has a very convenient NPC that'll refill a sub-tank for 50 energy crystals each, which I wonder why they haven't had something like this before now. Unfortunately, you have to replay the stage when you use this NPC since there's no quick way to warp back, but it's an inconvenience I'm glad they added regardless. As for the plot, it's then revealed that Master Albert is the creator of Model W and the Game of Destiny. Yeah, ZX1 alluded to this, and I even briefly mentioned it in my ZX video, but yeah, that's what that was leading to. Gray tries to stop him, but Albert escapes before he can really do anything. Master Thomas then orders Gray to seek out the rest of the Model W pieces to stop the Game of Destiny. What this means for gameplay is 4 new areas get marked on your map, and you can teleport them from a trans server. I guess they didn't bother making entrances in the world for these. At this point, the game gives you much more flexibility on the boss loader, but never as much as ZX1 did, or even a traditional Mega Man game's 8-boss selection screen. I'll start with the control center, and it's the remains of Slithering from the first game, even if the game itself doesn't mention it. If you recall from the ZX video, I didn't find it to be a very fun stage. Thankfully, they turned the elevators into a Rose Spark climb for a life up, so grab it. The stage is practically just the same stages from ZX, even down to the same layouts at points, but it doesn't have the boss rush and slow elevators, which is fine by me, since they made an otherwise good stage a slog in the first CX. There's even a really fun wall jumping section with Buckfire that reminds me a lot of Cyber Peacock's stage from X4. The boss is Queen Bee, and just use Model FX to shoot into her beehive to deal quick damage and mash like you're playing a Mario Party game once again. Model FX got a lot more use for me than the first game. That's a thing I like about ZX Advent, it forced me to use the other forms I didn't in the first. It's a double-edged sword, as what they did to accomplish that is they nerfed the other forms' combat potential by limiting movesets to the 2 characters, more so splitting them, and changing combos that would basically not exist. It's due to ZX Advent's different focus than the Zero games in the first CX, but it's not necessarily a bad thing for those playing casually. I don't mind it that much with that mindset, but I can see hardcore players being put off by this. After I beat Queen Bee, I happen to get a medal here actually, and it's the only one I happen to get in this playthrough. You do get something for getting all of them, but it's nothing beyond a novelty form, and it's not Model OX, sadly. It's Mega Man Model A with a lowercase a, and it's essentially just classic Mega Man with the wall jump, which is neat. Next stage is the Floating Ruins, and another decent stage, even if there's annoying enemies that disappear and shoot projectiles while invisible. The tornadoes are super fun since they carry your speed through them, making you fly super high with your dash jumps. There's a side quest here for a sub-tank, but I didn't bother with it since the other 3 are easily accessible, and I don't find most of this game that challenging. The NPCs are uniquely designed for the most part, which is surprising given this game's short development time, much like the first CX, and I'll give this game praise for that. I'll also highlight the music in this stage since it's probably my favorite track in the game. The boss here is Model HX, and he's really fun to fight. It's more like a character fight such as Base or Proto Man in Mega Man 8 and 3 respectively. He doesn't have that many crazy tricks, just dodges, attacks, and stays sharp. Wish this game had more Mega Man because their fights are the most fun as they're just one-on-one fights with no real gimmicks besides their abilities. Off to the highway now, and this stage is again a decently fun one with a neat puzzle to get a biometal upgrade where you hit a switch and use Chrono Force's ability in order to have enough time to dash to the other side before the gate closes. The mini-boss is a really cool fight as it chases you as it destroys the terrain, so you have to platform and fight at the same time. Wish more bosses in Mega Man did this, to be honest. The boss here is Model OX, and it's a joke, to be honest. The arena's so big and it's underwater, so you've got plenty of room to dodge. Of course, after beating this boss, this gives you Model LX, but there's not as many water areas in this game, so I didn't see much use for it this time. Last of these 4 stages is the Scrapyard, and I kinda despise this stage. Remember when I said the stages in ZX Advent were gimmicky? This is the kind of stage I was referring to. The stage is a giant maze complete with fake doors. I'd rather honestly have the Sunken Library in 03, the factory with the Screen Crunch in 01, or even the airship mid-stage in 02. At least those had actual platforming that didn't get me lost for 10 minutes. On further reflection, when I was writing the script for this, I was kinda angry when I played the stage, so it's not the worst stage ever, but I still stand by it being kind of gimmicky. Yeah, it's not all bad, as Model PX can see the fake doors on the bottom screen. I think the puzzle for the health up is actually pretty clever with the combination of Chrono Force's powers and Model PX, and the music slaps as per usual, but this is my least favorite stage in the game easily. The boss is very creative at least. He's a rockstar skeleton who summons trash minions that are taken right out of Mega Man 7. Use Model A's lock-on and take out his minions whenever applicable. Once those 4 stages are beaten, the quarry opens up as we have all the necessary forms to get there now. During the stage, Gray runs into Ale, which Ash runs at the vent by the way, and she's grown up since we last seen her in the first ZX game. Ale wants to destroy Model W and she thinks Gray is trying to harness his power, which means it's a fight, and I just love this fight. It's so cool having the protagonist of the last game fighting the current one, and I love when games do this. It's like Pokemon Gold and Silver when you fight Red on Mount Silver as the final showdown. Fight's super cool though, as Ale has all the moves you had in the previous ZX. Easy enough fight if you keep your distance though. You get Model ZX here, and you finally get the namesake of the game, and this reminds me of X7, where ironically Axel took X's spotlight by locking him away until later in the game. Same case here, but Model A has a different use than Model ZX, so it's a lot more justifiable here. The good news is Model ZX has been massively buffed when it was already the best form in the last game. The spin that I loved so much is even better in this game somehow. A spin then a triple slash cuts off around half a health bar. It's genuinely amazing. I use this all the way up to the final boss, it's so good. The rest of the stage is a decent time, even with the chase sequence reminiscent of Armor and Armadillo stage, and even a biometal upgrade attained in the same way as the heart tank in that stage. After the stage, Ale gives Gray access to the rest of the Pseudoroid stages, as she finally realizes he's on the same team. Now that access to the rest of the main stages is open, I wanted to make a point that I'm not sure many have made about this game. This game really doesn't know what it wants to be, and the ambition of what it tried to do in its short development time made it feel a little unfocused. There was always something that felt off about this game to me, and I finally found the answer. On one hand, it's trying to be a Metroidvania in terms of progression and design, but on the other hand, the Metroidvania elements are barely even existent in this game, since the map is very railroaded and areas only unlock after story progression. The stage design is linear with some light puzzles in them. It just feels unfocused to the point the game should have been level to level like every other Mega Man platformer, since they half-attempt Metroidvania here. At least in the original ZX, the world felt interconnected despite that game's issues with its map. You got keycards up to certain bosses that let you explore the map more, and there were even a bunch of side rooms. In ZX Advent, you got a keycard after the train, and one after Vent and Nail, and that's it. There's side rooms here and there, but they're not as expansive or interesting as ZX ones. The keycards in ZX Advent feel like arbitrary story gates as opposed to world expansions like the first game. Not a bad way to design a game at all, but it feels like they took Mega Man Zero when new missions appeared, but they had extra steps to make it feel like more of a Metroidvania than it actually is. The levels themselves, while not bad, it really feels like the map was supposed to be more interconnected like ZX, as places are gated by certain abilities much like a proper Metroidvania game, so the levels are decent but feel a little bloated given the slight lack of focus. It really doesn't help that this game has 15 different forms, so it's spread thin. I don't even use some of them because they have extremely niche use cases that another form can do better. Just wanted to put that little tangent out there since this game felt a bit off to me compared to the first one and every other Mega Man game in terms of structure and level design. They attempted to fix the flaws of the first CX, but they met this awkward middle ground of Metroidvania and traditional Mega Man game. They trimmed the fat so much that it's a traditional Mega Man X/Zero game, but there's a bit of walking before the stage. Anyways, we've got 3 stages to pick from: the Mysterious Lab, the Waterfall Ruins, and the Bio Lab. I'll start with the Waterfall Ruins, and it's certainly one of the more unique stages in this game. It certainly has a unique vibe that no other stage besides maybe Rainy Turtleoid's stage in X6 has, with the Asian-inspired motif, and the fact that the boss is at the start of the stage, which is a change. And it's a 2-for-1, as the Pseudoroid has 2 entities that you have to beat, which is a neat concept for a boss fight. The stage itself finally sees use of Model LX, as it allows you to climb the waterfalls for secrets, such as the last health up in this stage. There's a surprisingly very tricky section with underwater spikes and a mini-boss at the end that Model FX can take out with some Mario Party mashing. Next up is the Mysterious Lab, which is actually where Gray was in the intro stage. It's a relatively short puzzle level with these pushable batteries, and there's a sub-tank at the end of the puzzle room if you have the appropriate transformation, being the one you get in the Waterfall Ruins. The boss is a Sonic the Hedgehog knockoff and it's relatively slow despite the inspiration. Use Metal ZX to shred its health bar in no time. Its A-Trans ability allows Gray to move faster into small spaces so you don't have to crawl. There's additional lore here that Prometheus and Pandora are Albert's creations. They're even numbered like classic Robot Masters, and there's a Robot 000 he made. How intriguing. Last stage is the Biolab, and it's just a few long hallways with a water puzzle to get the last Biometal upgrade. Not much to note beyond that, honestly. I will warn that if you die, you'll have to redo a big chunk of the level since the stage doesn't have frequent checkpoints, which is an issue later in this game, since the rooms are relatively long given the amount of checkpoints. That's an issue in other Mega Man games, but this is the only stage where it really mattered in this game, with one exception. And I don't run into this often in the other X-Zero and First CX games, since the stages are only 3 to 5 minutes long as opposed to these being 5 to 10 minutes long in this game. This game does have lives, which I will bring up a bit later. The boss is Biofrost, and he's a giant crocodile, and Model ZX shreds him since he's slow and predictable like most giant Mega Man bosses. His A-Trans ability is kinda useless beyond smashing certain blocks throughout the game, which I used once for his tutorial, and never again. Since all the main stages are done now, it's off to Albert's base in the undersea volcano. I don't know how an active volcano can be underwater, but whatever. Level is genuinely whatever. Just swim past the volcanic rocks as Model LX and get past the enemies with whatever model you want. The level's alright, but the boss is genuinely the best one in the game. Great music, by the way, as per usual. The boss of the stage is Prometheus and Pandora. Who would have guessed? I thought they were the best boss in the first game, and that applies here too. Great patterns that go well together and fun model switching that'll test your skills. I was very close to dying on this boss, and it took a few tries. Great stuff. Also, their theme slaps, which is a remix of their theme from the first game. Albert confronts Gray, but he's attacked by Prometheus and Pandora. They despise him due to him limiting their lifespans and using them as pawns for his own game. Their hatred is then used by the Model Ws to fully awaken, and he reveals his survival as only Albert's decoy body, which was Robot 000 from earlier, was destroyed, and this plan has been fulfilled, and the ultimate Model W has been awakened, Ouroboros. With the help of Ale and the Guardians, this is the only time you see the Guardians in this game, by the way, Gray goes into Ouroboros for the final stage. The final stage is a doozy. This has got to be the worst final stage of the Inti Creates Mega Man games in my honest opinion. To compare to another game they made, Zero Twos is rough, but at least it was short and Opaiza was relatively easy for a final boss. This stage sucks for two main reasons, not including the boss rush. The length and difficulty. The length including the boss rush, which isn't split this time. It's all 8 bosses in a row per classic Mega Man. Technically it's in 2 rooms of 4, but they're right next to each other, so it effectively doesn't matter. The good thing is you get health and biometal energy refills per boss unlike the first ZX. Also, is that CL in the background of the boss rush rooms? Anyway, the stage took me 20 minutes to finish, which in my opinion is a bit too long for a Mega Man stage. The stage has the worst difficulty spike in the entire game. There's red flesh cubes that'll reform if you take too long, which is an instant kill, and there's spikes everywhere with some really tight jumps that are nerve-wracking. They're nerve-wracking given the amount of progress you lose given the lacking checkpoints, which I mentioned earlier. I'll give the stage this though. I love the almost alien aesthetic of this stage with the pulsating in the background, almost like a heartbeat. And the flesh cubes really making this place feel alive in the literal sense. When Gray gets to Albert, his amnesia is finally gone as Albert tells him the actual truth of his past and his reason for existing inside the capsule at the beginning of the game. Gray is a Reploid created by Albert, making him fit to be his successor using Model A. Model A stands for Albert because of this, not Axel. I believe they named him that since Axel's fate wasn't resolved after X8 and it still isn't to this day. Albert wants Gray to join him in destroying and recreating the world with Ouroboros. This is just Cyrus's plot from Pokemon Platinum, but whatever. Of course he doesn't want any of that, and the final boss ensues. Albert is the classic villain with the god complex, still a more interesting villain than Serpent, but not by much in my opinion. The final boss is split into 2 phases. The first phase is a 3-headed dragon mech that looks like they just ripped off Stardust Dragon from Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, even though that was the year after, but whatever. Just play Mario Party mashing again with Model FX, and it'll go down eventually. I have to mention the music of Phase 1 though. It's probably one of my favorite final boss tracks along with Sigma's second phase in X6 and Cannonball from 03. The second phase is Albert himself, and he protects himself with a shield. Use Model A's lock-on shot to destroy the things surrounding him to break the shield. Then use Model ZX for damage, since the spinning slash triple slash combo works wonders even here. He'll go down in no time. Gray defeats Albert and destroys Ouroboros and saves the day. Gray then parts ways with Ale for more adventures await for him in the future. Okay, I know I'll get comments about it, but I have to mention the secret ending before I include this review. It's unlocked after beating the game on Expert Mode or beating the game as both Gray and Ash on Normal. The ending shows that Master Thomas did agree with Albert that the world must be reset. This is an intriguing premise of having Thomas be the potential villain of the sequel, but sadly this never got resolved among other things such as CL's fate since ZX3 got cancelled midway through development. This was due to low sales and its creators were just working on Mega Man 9 at the time. Personally, I'm not too bummed about this honestly, as I see this more as a tie to the Legend series since the world in those games is flooded and consists of mostly desolate islands. I would love a ZX3, but I'm not the personally attached to the story of ZX, but I feel for those who are. My conclusion, like the thumbnail says, is this game is really interesting. It's a mishmash of being the bare minimum of Metroidvania when even its predecessor is more of one in terms of the map. It has gimmicky level design depending on the forms that's more Mega Man X and puzzle design, and has sorta Metroidvania design at points but doesn't fully commit. This game also takes Axel's abilities to the logical extreme with Model A. You'd think I'd hate this game since it's a stark departure from the usual formula, but no, I really enjoyed this game despite it feeling a bit weird compared to the pantheon of other Mega Man games. It's a breath of fresh air, and there's nothing else like it, but it's certainly not a game I'd replay much due to all this. But it's not a bad game, and I can absolutely see this game being someone's favorite. I still prefer the first ZX slightly due to it feeling more focused despite its glaring issues, but I'd say both ZX games are at least worth a shot. I'd recommend the Zero ZX Legacy Collection with the save assist since the live system can be quite punishing the first time playing, especially in Advent. Both games have fantastic graphics, controls, and music. If you can look past the structural and occasional level design hiccups, they're great games in my opinion. I still much prefer the Zero series since they're consistently focused and streamlined, maybe except the first one, but I respect the ZX games for what it attempted. Hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next review.